Paul George is the current shooting guard for the so far failing Los Angeles Clippers. He has failed to get any playoff success and has yet to make it to the NBA Finals. George was at one point almost the future of the NBA, being the leader on the excellent Indiana Pacers. But due to tough competition, trades, and a certain rapper from Portland, Paul George sits achievementless, with nothing really to show for it. Simply, what went wrong for Paul George? Let's start from the beginning. Paul George went to Fresno State and put up 14 points per game, 2 assists, and a team-high 6.2 rebounds as a Bulldog, which eventually led the Indiana Pacers to draft him with the 10th pick in the 2010 NBA Draft. Now, the Pacers already had an established star at the small forward position. Danny Granger had been playing for the Pacers since 2005. He had averaged 24 for the Pacers the year before Paul George was even drafted. So, it was already a little challenging for Paul George to even get noticed as a Pacer. Paul George started off averaging 8 points in his rookie year, which isn't all that bad, but in his sophomore season, the Pacers would move him to the shooting guard position and play him along Granger. Paul George even started every game that he played in that season. The Pacers this season also made it to the Eastern Conference Championship game against the Big Three Miami Heat, and were a game away from the NBA Finals, but did eventually lose that series to LeBron and friends. But then, something very big ended up happening to the Pacers that would reshape their future as we knew it. Danny Granger developed tendinosis in his left knee, which is an injury to the tendon connecting your patella to your shin bone, and only played 5 games in the 2012 to 2013 NBA season. This led to George starting all 80 games he played in that season, once again leading the Pacers to the conference finals against the Heat. Although the Pacers would once again end up losing that series, things were looking up. Until on August 1st, 2014, in preparation for the 2014 FIBA World Cup, Team USA held a team scrimmage, and in it, George left a contested James Harden layup in the fourth quarter. His lower right leg ended up catching the bottom of the basket and immediately buckled. This is definitely one of the most gruesome injuries in the sport of basketball has ever seen, and if you haven't seen it, I strongly advise you not to go out and search for it. This injury would not only reshape the future of the Pacers, but of course it very much changed the life of Paul George. George would eventually come back for the 2014 to 2015 NBA season and play just 6 games as tests to see where he was. Paul George would play 81 games the next season and 75 in the next, but in those 2 years, the Pacers would lose in the first round of the playoffs. First, they would lose a 7-game series to Toronto Raptors, and next year get swept by the eventual Eastern Conference champions, Cleveland Cavaliers. Paul George would become upset after a shutout of an Anthony Davis trade to Indiana, and would be convinced the Pacers were not committed to winning. This would eventually lead to Paul George getting traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder on June 30th, 2017 for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. This would form a new Big Four of Paul George, Russell Westbrook, Carmelo Anthony, and of course, Raymond Felton. This Thunder team would end up going 48-34, finishing 4th in the Western Conference, but ended up losing to rookie Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz in the first round of the NBA playoffs. This offseason, though, would be big for Paul George, because he was a free agent now. Now, the Thunder have already let Melo walk to Portland, but in a huge shocker, mainly the Lakers fans, Paul George would re-sign and run it back with the Thunder. Now, in the 2019 season, would be huge for Paul George. He would improve in almost everything while being able to average 28 points per game. George would end up being a top 3 finalist in the MVP race, but eventually lose to Giannis Antetokounmpo. This would be a huge turnaround and a career rejuvenation for PG-13. But now the Thunder would end up being able to win more games this season, but somehow fall to the 6th seed. Now, in the playoffs, nothing interesting or big happened at all. Except for,
chance to send the Thunder home. Lillard, long-range 3.
oh well, guess I forgot that happened. Right on Paul George too, man, that sucks. Well, might have been a bad shot, but I can't wait for Paul George and Russ to finally make it out of the first round and win a chip. And, Kawhi Leonard just signed with Los Angeles Clippers. Well, that doesn't matter, does it? Well, back to what I was saying. I can't wait for him to overcome the odds and, Paul George just demanded to trade to the Clippers. Well, the Thunder don't have to trade him. I bet this can all just blow over and Paul George just got traded to the Clippers. Yes, on July 10th, 2019, the same day Kawhi signed his contract to join the Clippers, Paul George demanded a trade to LA and got traded for, hear this, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-round picks, and the rights to swap 2 other first-round picks. This was another big shocker for Lakers fans. The Clippers would end up going 49-23. Now, if you're wondering why the season was only 72 games instead of 82, there was a little pandemic that happened that year that kind of shortened the season and sent the NBA to Disneyland. Now, this year, Paul George would finally make it out of the first round since 2014. Then, he would play the Denver Nuggets in the second round and eventually would go up 3-1 on them. Sounds great, right? Forgetting one thing. Things got kind of weird at Disneyland. For the second straight series, the Nuggets would come back from being down 3-1 and end up beating the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, in the next season, there was only one big change. The Clippers would move on from long-term coach Doc Rivers and sign Tyronn Lue to replace him. In my opinion, a very good move. The Clips would end up finishing 47-25 in another 72-game season and finish with the 4th seed in the West. The Clippers would beat the Mavericks again in the first round and beat the Jazz in the second. But something pretty dang important happened. In Game 4, Kawhi would drive to the hole against Joe Ingles and come up limping. He would actually end up tearing his ACL and would miss the rest of the postseason. Because of that, the Clippers would end up losing to the fiery hot Phoenix Suns and fail to make it to the finals. Now, in this past season, Paul George would spend most of the time injured. In addition to Kawhi being out the entire year, the Clippers would end up losing to the Minnesota Timberwolves and be bounced from the playoffs in the play-in tournament. Shout out to Pat Bev, by the way. Now, at this point, the chances of him ever winning a championship keep on getting slimmer and slimmer. And I think an MVP award is definitely out of the question. But really, I feel I can sum up Paul George's career failures in 3 simple things. Injuries, poor playoff performances, and, well, wanting to join the Clippers. Paul George had that career-changing leg injury in 2014, and the injury problems he's been dealing with to this day is definitely slowing him down. And you can't forget the horrible playoff performances throughout the years and losing over and over again. And finally, the Clippers. The injuries and the overall weird ways the front office has tried to build around Kawhi and PG-13. It seems like Paul George will never succeed with them. Now, there's still time, but I'm saying it seems like Paul George is getting to the end of his career, and I wish him nothing but the best. I really do hope he succeeds, but I have to say, it really seems like his future is not that bright anymore. But I would just like to thank y'all for watching this video on Paul George. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day, See ya.
Ball game.
So,
George, what?